Midlife. For some, the word alone is enough to send shivers down the spine. It's a time of challenge, change, and potential confusion. Or, if you believe the perspective of today's guest, the beginning of the very best part of our lives. Our guest today is Chip Conley, a true visionary in leadership, aging, and personal reinvention. He made his mark as the founder of one of the largest boutique hotel brands in the U.S. before making a surprising career pivot, becoming Airbnb's modern elder and helping guide that company through its explosive growth. He then took that phrase and created the Modern Elder Academy, the world's first midlife wisdom school, designed to help people navigate transitions with purpose, resilience, and a renewed sense of possibility. His latest book, I just finished reading it, Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. It really challenges the outdated myths that many of us have fallen prey to. And in today's conversation, we will dive into why midlife is not a crisis, but an opportunity. How we can redefine success and purpose in that second half of life, and why aging can actually be an advantage, not a limitation. If this is your first time joining us, I'm your host, Dr. Brad Cooper of Catalyst Coaching, and the author of a very related series, the Not Done Yet article series, to help individuals unlock life's second half. We will provide a link to Chip's book, as well as the freely available article series in the show notes. But you can imagine how that overlap between us meant I knew this was going to be one of my favorite interviews. Thank you for joining us and for making the Coaching Lab podcast a part of your week. If you're looking to earn your MBHWC approved coach certification, the Catalyst Coaching Institute was named the nation's #1 program by Fortune magazine and the most customizable by Forbes. And the personal touch, most of our programs involve less than 20 students, gives you the individual attention to be successful. Registration for our next cohort launch is available now at catalystcoachinginstitute.com, or please reach out anytime. The email is results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com. We can set up a time to talk through any questions you have about your future career, how it might fit into maybe a clinical practice, or other aspects that you have in mind. And now, it's time to flip the switch on the way in which we approach midlife with Chip Conley on the latest episode of the Coaching Lab podcast. Welcome to the show. Great to see you. We chatted a little bit prior to hitting record here, but this is going to be fun. Thank you for making the time for this.
Thank you, Brad. I mean, it's when someone said I was going to be doing a podcast with Bradley Cooper, I was like, okay,
ta-da! Well, you know, that guy's been using my name for years. I can't stop him. That's the way it goes. Well, let's kick things off with a term that a lot of our listeners probably hear and connect a second word to, and that's the word midlife. And they naturally go, crisis. Can you flesh out how you've reframed that from the way we traditionally look at it to what it really means? And I love your use of the word, the Greek word, I'm going to say it wrong, krinion, along with some of Dr. Levy's research. So just walk us through why it's not intended to be a crisis.
Yeah. So when we were, 6 years old, we learned about the caterpillar to butterfly journey. And it's sort of this magical metamorphosis journey that has as its middle stage the chrysalis. The chrysalis is the middle stage, in essence, midlife for the butterfly. It's dark and gooey and solitary, but it's also when the transformation happens. And social science research on this for humans is really interesting. It shows that there's a long, slow decline in life satisfaction that bottoms out around 45 to 50. And then with each decade after age 50, we get happier and happier. And it is that journey and the work of Becca Levy at Yale showing that when we shift our mindset on aging from a negative to a positive, so move from an anti-aging to a pro-aging perspective on our life and what gets better with age, we gain 7.5 years of additional life. So long story short is, wow, what if it's true that midlife is a chrysalis, a time of transformation and metamorphosis, as opposed to a crisis, something that when I was struggling in my late 40s. And I would say to people, I'm having my midlife crisis. And one of my friends said to me, "Oh, Chip, all you have to look forward to is disease, decrepitude, and death." And I was like, wow,
Well, that helped.
now I understand like why midlife is a crisis. But in fact, midlife may be the time that opens up the door to the best years of your life.
And how have we missed that? Because I've read Levy's research. I love that. And it's that reframing, but the words we choose, they drive our mindset so much. And that's part of your point, I think, is, wait, your friend that said, "Oh, here's what you have to look forward to," that's off base. And yet it's the status quo.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons for this. First of all, Hallmark cards. The fact that Hallmark for decades now has been making us laugh about our 40th or 50th or 60th or 70th birthday card, and how gravity takes hold, or just as we get comfortable in our own skin, it starts to sag. I mean, there's a lot of good jokes to be made. The reality is, though, also Hollywood had a huge impact here. The idea of the midlife crisis sort of came out of 1965 when the term was coined by a Canadian psychologist. And so there were some movies made about it. And so there's this sort of thing like, oh, okay, a midlife crisis is when a dude, it's usually a guy, right, around 50, buys a Porsche or a Ferrari or whatever, and he has an affair with, his secretary, and he leaves his wife. And the number of examples of that in real life is very small. And yet it took hold because Hollywood has a way of making, sort of shifting the narrative. And instead, I think what midlife is it's misunderstood. And part of the reason it's misunderstood, Brad, is because in the year 1900, longevity or life, the longevity or the number of years of life we had was 47 on average. And by the year 2000, it was 77. So we added 30 years of life in one century. And so I don't think people know what to do with midlife. It's sort of there's three life stages that actually emerged in the 20th century. Adolescence in 1904 with a famous book. Prior to that, you were an adult at puberty. Retirement in the 1930s. And both of those got a lot of love, adolescence and retirement, but midlife got no love, just got a bad brand. And so part of my job as a midlife activist is to help people to understand what is the upside of this era of our life.
A midlife activist. I am writing that down, my friend. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. So you dipped your toe into this, and I know you talked about it in the book. I'd written an article recently called "The 88-Year Mentality," and you basically rephrased my article in a different way, that we are still thinking about the numbers that you just mentioned, that our lifespan is 64 or 72, and if you retire at 65 and you're going to live to 72, well, then maybe we do kind of pack it in, but we don't. You're healthy at 75, you're getting to 90. And if you're healthy at 85, you're probably getting to 100. And that changes everything. And you talked about that. Can you build that out a little bit more for us?
Yeah, we'll talk in a few minutes about the Modern Elder Academy, MEA. But the average age of the person who comes to MEA is 54. So the average age for a lot of people who are in midlife and sort of reimagining what's next is about 54 years old. If you live till 90, and the chances are getting better and better that you will, 54 is exactly halfway between 18 and 90. So at 54, you have as many years of adulthood ahead of you as you have behind you, if you start counting adulthood at age 18. So that's a really important, new math around longevity. Because we don't really have very good longevity literacy. And a lot of people, if you hear that the average American male is going to live till 75, and you're 65, you think, oh, I've only got 10 years left.
Totally.
But the reality is, as you said, if you've gotten to 65, your chances to live to 82 are pretty good, or 50-50 at least. And if you are educated and have some money and are taking care of yourself, even better. So when we underestimate how much life we have ahead of us, we get into a fixed mindset. We stop trying new things. We don't do a very good job of investing or saving money in anticipation of how much additional life we have. And yeah, we end up, watching 47 hours a week of TV, which is what the average American retiree watches.
Wow.
Per week. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I hadn't written this down as a question, but you kind of brought it up. I've always looked at the three-leg stool of time, money, and health, and that most people choose two of those three or less. That's kind of what you were just talking about. They haven't prepared financially, or the health isn't there, and now they have the time, but neither of the other two, or only one of the other two. Do you see a lot of that? And we are going to talk about MEA in a moment here, but are you seeing a lot of that in the folks that are coming to you? They have two of the three, or are those the folks that they have all three, but they don't know what to do with it?
Yeah, I think there's other variables. I think time, money, and health are really important ones, but purpose is certainly
huge. Yes,
a big one, as is community. So I would say time affluence is a thing. And as we get older, and especially once we've moved out of the sandwich generation, taking care of older parents and maybe kids before they fly the coop, we don't have much time affluence, but we get into our 50s, mostly more our 60s, we have more of it. Money, it's such a variable for so many different people. It's scary how what small percentage of Americans are prepared financially for retirement, which is part of the reason why a growing number of Americans are going to work by necessity and some by choice into their late 60s and 70s. And then health, the health piece is essential. And what gets you to 90 is often your wellness practices. What gets you past 90 is often your genetics. And it's a very interesting thing. So it's health practices that often have the greatest impact. And when I say health impacts, or wellness practices, it's not just physical wellness, it's emotional wellness, mental wellness, social wellness. These sort of things that you have some variables that you can control. After 90, a lot of it does come down to some of your historical genealogy, and that's fine. I have two parents who are both 87 years old, and that makes me feel like, okay, I may make it past 90.
And you mentioned some things you're working on in Fort Collins, the director of the Health Span Lab here in Fort Collins. I don't know if the two of you have touched base, but Tom's been on the podcast. We talked a lot about that. And a lot of folks don't realize that they don't understand the difference between health span and lifespan. You obviously do. It's a fascinating concept. Can you just introduce that for folks that have not been familiar with the difference between the living longer and the living longer?
So, and living better.
Yes.
Lifespan is, how long you live. Health span is how long you're healthy. Yeah. And it's really that simple. And when there's a weird term that I don't like, but I'm going to say it anyways, compressed morbidity. It sounds terrible, but what it means is you actually have a health span that's longer, and the difference between health span and lifespan is very short. And you want to have as short of a difference between health span and lifespan as possible, because that just means you're healthy as long as possible. And so that's what we're aspiring to. Unfortunately, we live in a culture in which the health spans, both the U.S. is 48th in the world in all countries when it comes to longevity. That's terrible. And when it comes to health span, we're even worse, partly because of, our eating practices, drinking, and obesity, a lot of things that relate to lifestyle practices. And so for these reasons, health span and lifespan have some alignment, meaning if you are not in good health, you're likely to live a shorter period of time. But we have people who get sick chronically in their 50s and 60s and live till their 80s or 90s. And that's not a good life. It doesn't mean it's a bad life. It doesn't mean we should be shooting people and saying,
Right, right,
okay,
right.
well, we're getting rid of you.
Right.
No, it just means that when you have got like a serious case of diabetes that is controllable based upon your diet, you are starting to, mess with your happiness and your life satisfaction. And you have a hard time walking upstairs. And the kinds of things we should be focusing our attention on is what are the kinds of things we want to do at 85 or 90. So, being able to put a bag in a bin in an airplane is an important thing to be able to do. Being able to get out of a chair comfortably is important. Being able to balance on one leg for at least 5 seconds, pretty important, because the biggest risk that people have, and my father just had one, a couple of days ago, is falls. And we fall, and the less balance we have, the more likely we fall. The more likely we fall, the more likely we break a hip or knock our head and have a concussion or die. And so these are the kinds of things we need to be focusing on as we get older. But it's both. It's a combination. In the past, we thought it was just cardio, and now we know it's cardio and strength and balance. Sort of a nice mixture of those three that people need.
Yeah, absolutely. I love you talking about that. If we're gonna lose about 1% a year after age 40, you got to do the math backwards, folks, and figure out based on where you are now, what do you want to be able to do at 90? And the lifting something overhead is a great example, or getting out of a chair. As you were writing your book, Learning to Love Midlife, good stuff, man. I enjoyed it. What are some of the things that most surprised you as you were doing your research? What are the things where you came across and you went, oh, didn't expect to find that?
Well, women and men experience midlife similarly and differently. So the number one thing that women tend to think, this is data, not Chip speaking, but it's also, we have 7,000 alums of MEA. So I witnessed this as well, but it's social science research shows that women are worried about invisibility. Men are worried about irrelevance. Women tend to are dealing with menopause, which is a much more substantial hormonal change than andropause for men. Women are dealing with sometimes, especially if they're single, financial issues more than men. They may have taken time off from work. They may have been paid less. There's a bunch of things that may have happened such that they are a little bit more at risk financially. Women do more caregiving in midlife than men. So these are some of the things that women deal with. Men deal with a dropping being virile, virality. That's something they don't talk about. They are actually more likely to feel lonely because men are less good at making and keeping friendships and being vulnerable. Men have a bit of a myopic perspective on how important career and money is. So at the point when they start to move toward retirement, or they lose a job, or they actually do retire, they are not able to adapt as well as women, partly because they have been so one-dimensional.
Oh.
So there's a lot of interesting. So these are things that, I saw at MEA, but I'd never really did the research. And I said oh yeah, this is very clear. This is what I have experienced and seen with the 7,000 people who've gone through the program. But long story short is, I think the other thing that is really true is across cultures, this is becoming more and more the same. In the past, if you told me 20 years ago, I would have agreed with the premise that it says Asian cultures, African cultures, and Latin American cultures have a point of view, which is they look forward to getting older because elders are respected in those cultures. The truth is there's still a cultural relevance for elders in those cultures, but Google has replaced grandpa and grandma in terms of where does a grandson or daughter go to get their knowledge or wisdom. And so there's a growing sense that we have a playing field across the world that has a bit of an anti-aging perspective. And after, which is sad because there's some places, so in essence, the US has led on this thing because of Hollywood and because of Madison Avenue, advertising industry being for so many years so possessed by young models. How do
Sure.
we get those 18 to 34
Right.
year olds, 18 to 35-year-olds to buy our product because they'll be loyal the rest of their lives? Well, that was a bad premise on two levels. Number one is 18 to 35-year-olds don't have a lot of money. The majority of wealth and disposable income is 50 and older. And secondly, they aren't loyal. They aren't loyal like we were 50 years ago toward our brands.
Transition. So baggage in transition. Do you notice either with your alum and 7,000 alum? Wow, what an impact you're having. That is so exciting to hear. Is there baggage that you're noticing that was valuable in the earlier phase of life, maybe the career phase, that needs to be left behind as we move through that?
Yeah, the word you use is a really good one, Brad. I mean, if midlife, and I believe that midlife lasts from 35 to 75, in a world in which we have a greater number of centenarians, and we'll have 8 times more centenarians, people who've lived to 100 in 2050 than we do now, 8 times more. Yeah. Okay. So 35 to 75, let's get used to the idea that midlife has 3 stages to it. Early midlife of 35 to 50, the core of midlife 50 to 60, and later midlife 60 to 75. And there's a different flavor of each of those. And I talk about that in my book, Learning to Live Midlife. But I think the key thing to know is that midlife is a life stage in which we are supposed to realize that the first half of our life we're accumulating, and the second half of our life we're editing. And once we know that, whether that's knowledge, and it doesn't mean you get rid of knowledge, but it means you get clear on what knowledge is important. You get clear on who's important in your life. You get clear on what you want to do and what's important to you. And having the law, as we have a shorter time left in our life, and we have time scarcity, we need to get clearer about how do we want to spend that time. And so one of the things we do at MEA is the Great Midlife Edit. And it's an opportunity to let go of or edit mindsets, belief systems, roles, identities, archetypes of how we see ourselves that aren't serving us anymore. They may have served us well
exactly.
at age 30.
Right.
They may have served us really well at age 30. But at age 55 or 70, they're not serving us anymore. And so it's a really important part of anybody thinking about midlife. Carl Jung famously said, you can't spend the afternoon of your life based upon the rules of the morning. And what he was speaking about was afternoon being midlife and morning being young adulthood. And, the truth is things evolve, and you're supposed to evolve as well. And that means you're supposed to let go of some things.
And it's easy for you and I to be going, yeah, I totally agree. And I'm nodding my head as you're speaking. But my guess is you're seeing a lot of, and maybe they're not doing this in front of you, but pushback, like, no, I can't let go of that ship. That's what my whole identity is.
Yeah.
Especially you talked about men with relevance. I've meet with a lot of men that's their struggle is, well, who am I if I'm not that?
Yeah. Well, it is hard. And unfortunately, sometimes when we are carrying too much baggage on the midlife marathon, life circumstances kick us in the rear end and actually force us to come face to face with rethinking this. Brené Brown, who's a fan of MEA, the famous sociologist, calls this the midlife unraveling. And when she first said that to me, I was like, oh, that sounds terrible. And she says, no, it's a gift. I said, to unravel, like you say someone's unraveling if they're losing their mind. And she said, Chip, have you ever looked in the dictionary under the word ravel? And I did. And it's something so tightly wound, you can't get it undone. So the idea of a midlife unraveling means that at a time when you're as taut and your shoulders are tight and you're sort of like trying to get through it all and you're on the treadmill of life that's getting sped up, that you learn how to create some space, because actually if you have a ball of string that's wound up and unraveled and you can't get it undone, you have to create some space for the string to actually start to be able to make its way out of being knotted. And so how do we create space so that you can actually make sense of what you're ready to let go of? And there's a woman named Mary Catherine Bateson, who is a Harvard academic. Her mother was Margaret Mead, and she called it the midlife atrium. We need to create some space in midlife, and maybe the core of midlife, probably around 45 to 55. So target is around 50, where we can actually ask the question, how do I want to curate the second half of my adult life? I happen to sell my boutique hotel company that I started when I was 26 at age 50. I ran it for 24 years as CEO. We had 52 boutique hotels around California. But in my late 40s, I was struggling. I had never heard of the U curve of happiness and the low point being 45 to 50. Never heard of that. I just was living it. Right. And at 47, I had an NDE, a near-death experience, where I died due to an allergic reaction to an antibiotic. And it really woke me up to the fact that I could live my life differently. And I made changes in pretty much every part of my life, such that by age 50, I had space to have a midlife atrium. And the reason that we call it the midlife atrium, or Mary Catherine Bateson coined the term, is she says that with the additional longevity we have, people tend to think of extra longevity as having an additional bedroom to the backyard of life, as if you're old longer. But she said what we really need to think about is as if you're actually creating an atrium in the middle of your home, in the middle of your life. And the reason we like atriums is because there's light and air and space in which to reflect upon things. And she said, that's what we need to do around age 50. And so I did that. I did that for 2 years. And then, at 52, I was asked by the 3 young founders of Airbnb more than a dozen years ago to come in and be their modern elder, as they called it.
Love that.
Someone who's as curious as they are wise. This is their language, not mine. And I spent the next 7.5 years helping take their little tech startup and turn it into the most valuable hospitality company in the world. And that's really what helped me to see my relevance in my 50s.
And I think you said you're 65 now. So you've been working on this MEA for about 5 years, a little bit more than that. Yeah, although you probably pre-developed it with what you're doing with Airbnb. Yeah.
We started 7 years ago, and during my 4 years full-time and then 3.5 years part-time. During my part-time work at Airbnb, I started it.
Okay. Perfect timing, right as we went into COVID, right? You've touched on this, but let's develop it further. You have a quote, "There must be more to life than this." It's something we hear all the time. You dive into the question related to this yearning for more by asking, more of what? How might someone explore their unique answer to that question? More of what? That was the purpose piece that you were talking about.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, 2 thoughts here. One is purpose should be a verb, not a noun. It's not a possession. It's not something everybody else has, but you don't have one, like a BMW. Purpose is an action. It's to be purposeful. And there are really 4, sort of shortcuts to purpose: something that excites you, something that agitates you, something that it makes you curious, or something that feels neglected from earlier in your life.
Let's say those again for me. Neglected.
Something that excites you.
Something
that agitates you. So that's weird. Like something that agitates you could be a purpose. Yes, it could be. That's what Reed Hastings did when he started Netflix.
Okay.
He hated Blockbuster and the late charges. So that's something that makes you curious, or something that's neglected from earlier in your life. We had a litigator, 60 years old, come to MEA, to a Cultivating Purpose workshop, and she was struggling with, she wanted to work 10 more years, but she hated being a litigator. For the week, she realized, based upon dreams she was having and conversations she was having, that like when she was a kid, she loved cooking pies with her grandma. By the end of the week, she realized, I'm going to go to pastry chef school on Saturdays and still work as an attorney, and try that out for 3 months. And if I like it, I'm going to quit being a litigator and I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And that's what she did. So those are the 4 paths. Now, what would I say to someone to help them to wake up to what they could be doing? One of my favorite questions to ask is 10 years from now, what will you regret if you don't learn it or do it now? And the reason I like that question is because actually, if you ask that question at 20, it doesn't matter much. At age 20, like, okay, whatever. But at age 50 or 55, when I asked that question, when I moved to Mexico to open our first campus in Baja, an hour north of Cabo San Lucas, on the beach, I had a mindset, which was I was 57 at the time. I had a mindset which was, I am too old to learn Spanish. I am too old to learn to surf because we're right on a surfing beach. But when I put it in the framework of how 10 years from now, what will I regret if I don't learn it or do it now, especially if I'm going to be living in Mexico 10 years from now, it's not going to be easier to learn Spanish or to surf at age 67 than 57. And so anticipated regret is a form of wisdom. And let me say that again. Anticipated regret is a form of wisdom. And so helping a person feel the catalyst, a word that I know you like, the catalyst of the potential of regret in the future allows them to go out and try something today. And so, yes, it's a combination of helping people to find their purpose, helping people to feel a sense of time scarcity, and the anticipated regret that may lead them to trying something new at a time in life where a lot of people just sort of mail it in and just get stuck in comfort zone. And then they wonder why they're so bored.
Yeah. And the regrets start to pile up. I think this is a good time to talk about the TQ, the transitional IQ. Tell us a little bit more about it, but then how do we enhance that transitional IQ?
Yeah. So we're very clear as a society that during adolescence, during your teen years, you're going through hormonal, emotional, physical, and identity transitions. We are less clear as a society that during midolescence, on the adult corollary of adolescence around age 50, that you're going through hormonal, emotional, physical, and identity transitions. And so part of what we started to do at MEA was to elevate the idea that learning how to navigate transitions is a lifelong pursuit and skill, and one that's more and more important in a world that is constantly changing. Mm-hmm. So we coined the term TQ, transitional intelligence, with the idea of helping people to understand that there are three stages to any transitions. The ending of something, the messy middle, and the beginning of something, just like there's caterpillar, chrysalis, butterfly. And so once you understand the roadmap of a transition in these three stages, you are better able to understand what are the coping mechanisms, what skills do you need in each stage. And so this is a core part of our program. So MEA's program has navigating transitions, cultivating purpose, and owning wisdom as the three pillars of the program, all under the umbrella of reframing our relationship with aging. So transition is really important because you're going to go through them. I mean, let's just think for a minute, Brad, like here are the kinds of transitions that happen in midlife: menopause, divorce, retirement, changing jobs, getting fired, selling a business, a cancer diagnosis, parents passing away, empty nest, a spiritual or religious curiosity that you didn't have in your 30s, that you may have around 50. So there's a lot of things that happen. But for a lot of people in midlife, when they're going through transitions, they feel like they're getting the game of life wrong because they're sort of feeling like, oh, I'm not supposed to be going through a transition.
Right.
Guess what? Everybody's parents die. Every one of us has parents who die. That is a transition. It's natural and normal. It doesn't mean that we should discount it or say buck up. It's a hard thing to go through, but it's a normal thing to go through. But for a lot of people, they feel they are ill-equipped to deal with the kinds of transitions that that we go through in midlife. And part of the reason for that is we have no social infrastructure to support people in midlife to go through it together. When you're going through adolescence and you're having your first kiss, or you're getting your first job, or you're taking your SAT test or whatever, you're doing it with a peer group and you're all doing it together. We're going through this all together, but we're not at exactly the same ages, though. When we were back then, we were doing it at the same age.
Right.
Doing it at slightly different ages because people have kids at different ages and people retire at different ages. People have menopause at different ages. Having said that, they're generally the same age, but there's zero in the way of schools or tools to help people to understand what I'm going through is normal.
Yeah. Love this. Okay, transitions. You mentioned Bruce Feiler. He was a former guest on the podcast. His final words in his book are some of my favorites of all time. And let me just read them because I think it ties into what we're talking about. He says, "It's time once more to utter the most spellbinding, life-affirming words we can utter. The words that suggest a story is coming, maybe even a fairy tale. Once upon a time." Why does the story we tell ourselves play such an important role in our lives, especially as we get into this phase and move through it?
So stories can liberate and or incarcerate. And what I mean by that is the narrative we tell ourselves. You like that?
I like that.
The narrative we tell ourselves influences the mindset we have and the pair of glasses we wear. And therefore, if you believe that you are a hero or a victim, or if you believe that you can only be successful, only be loved through your success, or you believe that you have to be the caregiver,
yes,
and you care for everybody else before you care for yourself, and that's your redeeming quality. We rely upon these stories and these narratives to define and chisel who we are, our sense of personality. And personality can be really challenging because you get stuck in a personality just like you get stuck in a story. And if you get stuck in it, that's the incarceration piece, in the sense of it means that you don't see yourself as something other than that story or that personality. And that can be incredibly limiting. Part of the thing we talk about at MEA is help people to rise above their story. Their story can be a platform upon which something else can actually sprout, be good soil, create the fertility of something to sprout from it. But the reality is that a lot of people don't live that way. They don't have the tools or the environment or the people to help them rise above that story and see that the story has created a hero's journey narrative that allows them to transcend their story. So Joseph Campbell's work is a very big part of our program because it really speaks to the idea that, again, 3 stages. Yeah. The hero's journey has 3 stages: the known world, the unknown world, and then you come into the world in a new way, with a new kind of fullness and wholeness, based upon what you learned in your call to adventure. That's a 3-stage journey. That's again, just like transitions. So this is a really important piece of midlife, is to be able to see your story. One of the things that you get, when you're reading a novel, about a quarter of the way through the novel, you may not understand the characters or the theme of the book or the key issues. By the time you're halfway through a novel, you understand the characters and the issues. And that's true in your life as well. By the time you get to halfway through your life, you have pattern recognition to understand who you are and how you show up in the world and the patterns you have. And if you do that well, you can take the unconscious and make it conscious, and then it no longer controls you. It's not magic, but it does require a certain amount of courage to face the shadow, to face sometimes the things that are what you're ashamed of, or what you don't like to talk about. And So, that's part of our program as well, is to help people to come face to face with something that has been stymieing them for a long time.
So let me push back just a little bit. You said by midlife, we know who we are. And I know that's true for many people, but it seems to me like we know what we do. We actually don't understand who we are. And that's part of the journey you take people through, is helping them discover the who behind the what. Would that be accurate?
Yes. If you don't know who you are, you become what you do.
Exactly.
If you don't know who you are, you become what you do. So it is in midlife, you start to open the doorway, this chrysalis. You go into this chrysalis where you become aware of who you are, not just what you do. And, the thing that the cliche that's said all the time is you become a human being, not a human doing. But in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, you're often a human doing. You really,
what that phase is all about. Yeah.
That phase is about that. That's, this is not new. This is like, we didn't just come up with these ideas. This is the way it's been for a long, long time. What's made it more interesting is people are living longer. So, so as you said earlier, if people are, retiring at 65 and dying at 72, or more likely, 75 years ago, retiring at 60 or 65 and dying the next year, or dying before retirement. All of these things mean that making sense of this additional longevity and what we call long life learning, not lifelong learning, but long life learning, understanding the life stages and the psychology of aging in an era in which people are living a very long time. And none of us have been taught this. And this is, part of the reason I love creating a curriculum that's based upon this.
I love your word flip there, the long life learning versus lifelong learning. I think the universities need to get busy tapping into that one, my friend. Maybe that's another role for you. Okay, second part of that with Bruce's stuff, how do we develop better narratives, knowing that we're the authors? Do you help folks with that? Is it discovering our story, or is it, to me, it's kind of rewriting our story?
It's both. It's discovering it and then elevating or creating the script. Many of us have not been screenwriters, we've been actors. And so we're reading from the script that our parents gave us, or the community gave us, or, our ex-spouse gave us, or whatever. I mean, and we're sort of, and then, we sort of like, this script is like dated. I don't like the old script. But how do you then take that and say, okay, I'm ready to try something new? And that's part of what we do as well, is to help people to understand, okay, this is, as Marshall Goldsmith said, what got you here won't get you there. What got you here has gotten you to where you are. And if you're at 50 years old or 55 years old or 45 years old and you feel satisfied, but a little empty and very clear that you don't want to continue on the same path that you're on, which is where I was at 47 when I had my flatline experience, then you have to wake up to saying, how do I write a new script, or how do I write my own script for the first time? The first thing you have to look at is this thing called successism. So we have consumerism, a word that's 70 years old, and we know that means keeping up with the Joneses. Successism is keeping up with your parents' expectations of you. And so learning how to actually unload the burden of successism means getting clear how you define success. What's your scorecard for success? What matters to you? Who do you admire out there in the world, and how they have curated their lives? What is a perfect day for you? And and more importantly, not a perfect day, because we can all script that.
Sure.
What is a perfect year for you? Like if you were to script a year, what would it look like? And how far is it from the life that you currently have? So long story short is there's a lot here. And unfortunately, we don't have schools for this. As I've said before, I mean, no one taught me this stuff. So it was me and my two co-founders in tandem with academics from Harvard, Yale, Stanford, and UC Berkeley, and then thought leaders like Bruce. Bruce, helped us with the transitions work. And we've had all kinds of really great thought leaders globally who've helped us craft our program.
It seems like one of the big struggles with another great analogy, the actors versus screenwriters, by the way, is we've been doing it so long. I was talking to my son the other day. He's 25. He's just wrapping up med school. And I said, you're in this wonderful phase where you've known I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this. Like, it's been scripted, and it will continue to be somewhat scripted for another 20-ish years. And then all of a sudden, there's no script. And on one hand, that's awesome. Like, that's beautiful. And on the other hand, it's
scary.
Yes. Yeah. So how do you help folks get through that scary element? Because I think that's probably more common than I'm ready. I don't know what to do.
For men, again, this is, slap me around for listeners who don't like me saying it, but for men, it tends to be when it comes to their career and when there's retirement or getting fired. Yep. For women, it's often when empty nest happens. Empty nest as a syndrome is much more, affects women more than men. So long story short is it's learning how to find the ritual that says that's the end of that phase. And this is an identity that's a raincoat that I'm ready to take off, and I'm ready to try something new.
All right, so that wraps up part one of this interview. Chip was very generous. We got a chance to chat for about 90 minutes. So the part two of this interview will be in the next episode. So look forward to that. Dive into that. As always, feel free to reach out to us with any questions about your current or future coaching career. Results at catalystcoachinginstitute.com, or you can tap into additional health, wellness, and performance resources on the website, catalystcoachinginstitute.com. And now it's time to be a catalyst. This is Dr. Brad Cooper of Catalyst Coaching. I will speak with you soon on another episode of the Coaching Lab podcast, or maybe over on the YouTube coaching channel.